Hello, everyone. I believe we are recording now, and welcome to the very first session of innovation training for our agricultural waste biochar conversion uh, grant program that ends in you guys all being placed in internships. So we're going to start with some general training on innovation, and then there's a number of other additional modules that may or may not be relevant for you, depending on the internship direction that you go in. So I want to introduce quickly my right-hand woman when it comes to preparing these training sessions, delivering them for you in the future, and setting up the internships and presentations for you all. So this is Jaden Connor. Jaden, if you want to introduce yourself quickly.
Hi, everyone. My name's Jaden. I'm Dr. Woods' lead student assistant, and I'm really excited to go through this innovation workshop with you guys.
Okay, so thank you, Jaden. If I move on, oops. Okay, so there's 6 key behaviors for being innovative, and these are really key behaviors in life in general, but they certainly are about taking an innovative approach to life. But they certainly are skills and ways of thinking that you're going to need as you go forward in your careers as science professionals and for these internships. So first of all, take initiative. Like, it's so important. There's so many people in the world that think a lot and don't do something. Believe me, your employers want you to do things without them having to tell you to do them first. It's super important in all kinds of different ways that we'll get into more in the rest of the presentation, that you just do it. Take initiative, do something, don't sit back and wait. The second behavior is think outside the box. That's kind of a cliche phrase, but it really means deliberately pushing yourself to make connections, identify ideas or information that are not part of your normal way of thinking. It's a very deliberate way of broadening your mind, and it's very important for finding innovative solutions to things. The third behavior is solve problems. Problems always come up. Part of the reason you guys are being placed into these internships is because the various companies we're placing you with have problems and they need you to help them solve them. That's why most people have jobs in the first place, is because there's a problem that somebody needs to pay you to solve. But if you think more broadly about not being deterred by problems, like, problems are going to come up along the way of developing something new and innovative. And if you come up against a situation where, oh, geez, like, I thought it was going to work to like recycle all this ag waste, but there's no way to pick it up and get it to where it needs to be. Well, you could stop at that point, or you could find a way to pick it up, or you could find a way, thinking outside the box, to bring whatever needs to happen to the ag waste to the waste, rather than bringing the waste to the process. So don't be deterred when you come up against something that seems to stop you in your path. Find ways over it, around it, find ways to pivot. We'll talk about that more later. Be relentlessly diligent. So there's no substitute for hard work. Hard work is not enough. There's lots of people in the world that work hard, but don't end up doing something innovative. They just sort of are good soldiers. But being innovative, being an entrepreneur, is not somehow a shortcut so that you don't have to do hard work. A lot of times you just have to be meticulous. You have to put in hour after hour of work, and you have to be relentlessly diligent. It's a very important part of being innovative. The fifth of these 6 behaviors is be open-mindedly humble. So some people have more trouble with this than others. This is personally, out of the 6 behaviors, my hardest one. I feel very strongly about like the way that I do things and the right way to do things and like how to achieve results in the world. And I always have to remind myself that I'm just one person and I don't know it all. There's lots of people out there that know more stuff than me. And almost on almost any topic, there's someone that knows more than me. And certainly for topics where I'm not an expert, like STEM. I mean, you all are the experts in STEM. It's actually very good practice for me working with any kind of STEM students because it's so obvious that there are things about the technical side of biology or chemistry or in some cases in other projects, mechanical and electrical engineering that I don't understand. And I have to recognize that I still have value, even though I'm not the expert on something. And just because in the other direction, just because I am an expert on entrepreneurship doesn't mean that I'm the only one that knows how to do it right. So you have to work with other people. You have to see everybody around you as being able to contribute something valuable. If you don't do that, you're closing your mind and you're not really being innovative. And then finally, be transparently cooperative. Like there's so many communication breakdowns in any organization, and STEM professions are no different. You have to be transparently cooperative and first of all, want to work together with other people, but also just be upfront. If you don't understand something, say it. If you feel like someone is not understanding what you're trying to explain, mention it. If you have worked really hard on a problem and have one additional solution that you need to find and you haven't been able to find it yet, don't feel like you're responsible for having fixed it all yourself. And you can't say that you haven't figured something. Just say, hey, we've done all this, but we can't figure this out. If you're just upfront with people, it's really important for innovation. So those are the 6 behaviors that are gonna resonate throughout the rest of this presentation and pretty much everything else that that we present to you all. So moving on to the next slide. The whole point of this training is to try and shift you from a fixed mindset to an entrepreneurial mindset. So a fixed mindset is the way most people look at the world. You have certain knowledge, you have certain skills. There are certain situations in which you are very valuable and expert at using that knowledge and skills, those talents and abilities. And you try to put yourself in situations where you know the situation and you have certain talents and abilities that you can apply in that situation. An entrepreneurial mindset does not search for known situations. It's all about working in uncertain or unknown situations. And it's all about being able to quickly notice information around you, take action, and then organize in a systematic fashion next steps, no matter whether you feel like you're in control of the situation or it's changing every day. An entrepreneurial mindset is all about jumping into the middle of uncertainty and creating order out of chaos. If you're not comfortable with chaos, you're not really working with an entrepreneurial mindset. All of us as human beings are to a certain extent uncomfortable with chaos, but an entrepreneurial mindset is about embracing uncertainty, embracing chaos, and bringing order to it as a profession, basically, as a way of working, as a way of life. Okay, so there's probably more than 6, but there's 6 major things that keep people from having an entrepreneurial mindset. One of them is fear. It's probably the most important thing. You don't want to fail. You don't want to look dumb. You don't want to lose money if you invested money in something. You don't want to lose your job because you tried something and it didn't work. You don't want to get a bad grade in a class. Like, there's always fear of, like, it's not, this example I'm about to give is not like a STEM example necessarily, but I think it's something that most people can relate to. If you try and learn a foreign language, and if you plop yourself down in the middle of a country where there's another language and culture rather than the one that you're familiar with, most people are really afraid to talk because they're afraid that they're going to say something wrong, or it's nonsense, or that they get the grammar wrong or whatever. And that fear, like, nobody's going to bite you if you say the wrong words in another language. But that's the fear irrationally in your head. So, fear of failure, fear of the unknown is a lot of times something that gets in the way of having an entrepreneurial mindset. The second thing, no appetite for chaos. You have to be comfortable with not knowing everything. You have to be comfortable with the situation changing and evolving. If you have to have certainty in the way, if you have to have certainty in the environment that is around you, it's hard to be entrepreneurial. You have to be uncomfortable with the fact, you have to be comfortable with the fact that things are constantly changing around you. And that's okay. You have to make sure that you don't judge ideas too soon. Like, this is, I think our world today is like particularly negative. There's so much negativity that I think most of you are all familiar with how many ways that people will tell you how you can't do something. How many different ways people will tell you how something won't work. And that's like poison to entrepreneurial thinking. Like, don't judge, and no matter how crazy or silly an idea seems, don't judge it too soon. Just work on it, like, give it the same chance as all the rest of the ideas, and let the ideas sink or swim over time on their own merits. Don't judge them too soon. The fourth one here, dislike for incubating ideas. It takes time for good, innovative ideas to come true. I think probably most of you in the STEM fields are better at this than business students, or like me. I was originally a history major as an undergrad. I wasn't even a business or a science student. And everybody likes immediate gratification, and good ideas you don't go from idea today to millionaire tomorrow. There's lots of testing and prototyping and talking with customers and figuring out how to work together and finding funding. And there's a lot of steps in between a good idea and changing the world. And if you're not patient about the incubation period that's necessary for turning an idea into reality, then you're going to be constantly frustrated. The fifth one is certainly something that I've had a big problem with most of my life. Like, a lot, for not to like sound arrogant and say that I'm smart, but I am a relatively smart kid, and most of you are too. And when you're a smart kid, when you're a smart person in general, you feel like if something's not hard to do, it must not be very valuable. And that is not the case in entrepreneurship. Like, it might be, you might have an idea which is super simple, but for whatever reason has not been implemented before. And just because the idea is simple, just because making it work is simple, that doesn't mean it's not a good idea. Sometimes smart people feel like solutions have to be really complex, and usually it's better if they're not. but don't feel like just because something is not hard to do that it's not valuable. And then finally, this is another one that I, over the course of time, have had a lot of challenges with. You need to be able to distinguish reality from fantasy. Like, I think everybody's familiar with the book Don Quixote, or at least the idea of Don Quixote. And Don Quixote would always joust windmills because he thought they were giants. And he was a great guy and like was an expert knight, but he was jousting windmills instead of real enemies. And it's super important to constantly, not constantly, but let's say weekly, on a regular basis, you need to compare whatever you're working on with an alternative, and see whether the opportunity cost of your time and energy investment could be better spent some other way, or whether you're doing the right thing. It's really hard. It's really easy to get trapped in a rabbit hole when you're working hard on coming up with a new solution to something. And you have to be able, and it's also very easy to become enamored with your idea and not recognize certain problems around you that are standing in the way of making that dream become, that idea become reality. You have to be able to regularly step back from your idea and look and see if it fits in reality, or whether there's a discongruity or an incongruity. And if there is, that doesn't mean you failed. It just means you have to find a way to like bridge that gap. So don't get lost in a rabbit hole is, I guess, the punchline of the sixth one there. Some of you may feel like you gravitate towards the word entrepreneurship more than others. But anyone, I want to tell you that anyone can develop an entrepreneurial mindset. Even if you feel like, oh my God, I hate uncertainty. Like I already am uncomfortable listening to the rest of this presentation because it sounds like it's going to be scary. It sounds like it's going to be uncomfortable. It's not my bag. It's not my cup of tea. That's okay. But don't worry. Anyone can develop an entrepreneurial mindset. Like, all of us are stronger in one or other of the 6 behaviors that I mentioned and weaker in others. And it's just a constant process of recognizing, not in a schizophrenic way, but in a like cognitive mental health kind of way, recognizing the self-talk that you're engaging in, recognizing what your own cognitive limitations are, and phrased in a different way, going back and looking at those 6 behaviors, looking at those roadblocks, and identifying for yourself what are the ones that make me the most uncomfortable, which are the ones that I have the most challenge with, what are my weak spots. And then the rest of this presentation, we're going to talk about some cognitive strategies that you can use to overcome whichever of those areas you feel like you're weak in. So one way of looking at mindset that is useful for jarring yourself out of whichever problem area you feel like you're having is seeing thinking as divergent versus convergent. And I've organized the 6 behaviors that I mentioned before into divergent versus convergent thinking. There's 3 of each. And I don't think I did that on purpose originally, but it's not surprising, because sometimes it's really important to be divergent and sometimes it's really important to be convergent. So usually when you're trying to be innovative, you want to start out by generating as many ideas as you can. And then you want to narrow down on the ideas that have the most potential for success and focus. So when you're when you're thinking divergently, those are behaviors like thinking outside the box and pushing yourself to make connections, identify information that's outside of your comfort zone. Being transparently cooperative. If you tell people what you don't know, it will probably bubble up somebody that does know, and it generates more information in general. And then being open-mindedly humble as well. That's about recognizing that there's information out there, either with other people or from topics that you don't understand well, that you could learn. And just recognizing that you don't know it all is essential to divergent thinking. And then on the other hand, when you're trying to avoid getting caught in a rabbit hole, when you actually are trying to take a good idea and turn it into reality, that's where taking initiative, solving problems, and being relentlessly diligent comes in. That's like, a lot of times people will think of all kinds of good ideas, but then be paralyzed about what to do next. Taking initiative is all about what to do next. And then as you start to try and make something work, you're going to come across problems, and you have to be comfortable with finding ways to solve them and not being deterred. And then finally, good old hard work, relentless diligence is required to go from really good idea to actually a new working product or working solution in reality. Design thinking is a really important way of thinking that is in circulation in a lot of innovation circles, and it really involves seven steps that you use to take a problem and turn it into a solution. The first thing is observing. You have to look around you and gather information. You have to listen to the people around you. Super, super important. Innovation and coming up with new solutions to problems, thinking outside the box, being entrepreneurial is not an isolated activity. It's a social activity. And you have to talk with, and listen to the various other people in the organization where we place you for your internship. In any situation, when you're trying to be entrepreneurial and innovative in the future, you need to seek out and listen to the information in the heads of the people around you. You have to have a passion for change. Like, design thinking is all about believing that it's always possible to make something better. If you don't have a certain passion for doing things better than they were yesterday, making more money, doing things faster, making a stronger material, growing food faster, finding lower costs for processing agricultural waste. If you don't have a passion for making things better, it's hard to stick with the whole design thinking process. After you've looked around and gathered information, you've listened to all the important people involved in a certain activity or process, and you really want to do something to make things better, you also need to think about the broader context. Like, if we talk specifically about your internships, you're going to be in one particular company. But when you apply design thinking, you have to think about all of the other agricultural companies that have waste. You have to think about all of the other companies in California that might be able to do something with that waste. You have to think about all the people that need jobs. You have to think about the broader context and how to integrate your solution into the world around you. Being solutions driven is really the design thinking version of my 6 behavior points about solving problems. Like, you're gonna come across challenges in trying to make a new idea work, and you have to be focused on getting past whatever those problems are and not being deterred by them. Exercising consideration is really, it's similar to the fourth point there, but it's more about like checking back in with the people in your organization, the people in other organizations or customers or whatever, the people that are going to be involved in using this new product or new solution in some way, and make sure that they're on board with it. That it's particularly about interpersonal consideration rather than the whole big picture of the ecosystem. And then practice unbound thinking is another way of saying think outside the box. So you don't want to, as you're trying to implement solutions and find things that are like considering all the different partners involved, and that are, you know, integrating into the context of your ecosystem around you. Don't keep blinders on for how to make things work. Like, try to think as broadly as possible. Okay, observation methods. So, you know, we talked about observing as the first step in the design thinking process. There's 4 situations that you will probably be in your internships. And they're pretty much the same 4 types of positions that sort of expert design thinkers go into on purpose in order to find new solutions and entrepreneurial opportunities. So you could either be a complete observer. Some of you are going to go into internship positions where basically you're just watching what everybody in the company does. And maybe the point of your internship is to just come up with a new report or idea about how to perhaps do things better. In that case, you're a complete observer. You could also be an observer as participant, which is basically your main job is to observe and take notes and basically produce a report by the end of your internship, but you're also helping to manage the agricultural waste. You're you know, maybe making some phone calls and doing some tasks around the office. You're part of the team, but your main job is like observing and making a report or coming up with a new idea. If you flip that, you could also, some of you will largely be doing work for the company. You know, I need you to like manage gathering up all of the cow pee and cow poop from the dairy. Like, I need you to make sure to find people who will do that, and you need to check and make sure that it all like got from point A to point B, and then you know, you need to make sure that it got weighed so you know how much the weight is, and then you need to make sure to write a report, and you need to put into the spreadsheet what the costs of the hours paid were. And there's just various tasks that you might need to do in the internship. But then in addition to the day-to-day tasks, you also, as a side project, are coming up with a better idea for by the end of the internship. That's a third situation. And the fourth situation is, forget about the new idea. You're just doing stuff. And honestly, that's not necessarily uninnovative. It just means that you come up with the idea after sort of it's like diving underwater, and you're underwater for like as long as you can possibly be, and then you come back out from underwater, and then you apply the innovative thinking process to all that you learned while you were underwater. So some of you are going to simply be doing tasks for the internship, and the innovative part comes at the end of the internship. So those are 4 different ways to observe that all of you are going to be in one way or another. Very important to interview people to identify needs. So except for the complete participant version, which for those of you who are placed into complete participant internships, I will work with you in particular for how to integrate interviews. I mean, basically, I want to move all of you from anybody that's incomplete participant. I'm going to try to move you to participant as observer, because the whole point of this project is to come up with something innovative by the end of it. So if you are in a complete participant situation, we're going to try and move you to having an observer, having a innovation deliverable result part of it. And in order to do that, in addition to observing, you need to talk with the people in the organization. You need to talk with customers, suppliers. You're going to have to interview people. And this is not like just, interviews for a class project. You may think that interviews are already only done by journalists and for class assignments, but interviewing is an essential part of innovation. Like there's a certain way of asking people questions and listening to them and taking notes that is essential to do anything innovative. Like I said before, it's a social activity. Being innovative is about learning from the people around you. So there's kind of two steps to that: what you do during the interview and then what you do after it. During the interview, you want to come prepared with a list of open-ended questions. Do not, under any circumstances, unless you specifically are trying to test something, when you're gathering information, do not ask questions that can be answered with yes or no. Like, ask people things like, how does the company currently dispose of its agricultural waste? Like, what is the schedule by which you, Mr. Supplier, deliver stuff for our company every week? Or if you're talking to a certain manager in the company, tell me, what are the biggest problems that you're having with, let me switch from ag waste to renewable energy. What are some of the biggest problems that you have with biofuels right now? What's the biggest limitation? You're asking things like what, how, not if. You don't want to have people just say yes or no. You want people to talk as much as possible. Once you've got people talking, write everything down. If they feel comfortable with it, record it. Like, this is one of the reasons why I record almost every Zoom class and call and conversation I ever have, so that if I have to, I can go back and like catch the stuff that I missed. Like, take notes on everything. If somebody said, let me think for a second. Like, if possible, write down like, at this point, they had to think for a little bit. Like, that may seem really neurotic, but it might show you that in their thinking process, that was a point at which it was difficult to pivot, and that might be useful later. So write everything down or record it in some way, if you're able to, with Zoom or in some other way, so you don't have to like write constantly while you're talking. But do not miss information. Right, get it all down, and then make sure that you parrot back to the person you're interviewing. Okay, like, if I understood correctly, the problem is that the ag waste like dries up too fast, and then it's really hard to actually pick up and move to anybody that might want to use it for biofuel. Like, you need to rephrase things back to people before you end the interview to make sure you understood the major points. And then after the interview, you want to go back, read through all your notes, and make notes to yourself like, you know what? Like, they talked a lot about liquid issues rather than solid issues. I didn't really notice that while we were talking. Another way of looking for those, really points 1 and point 2 are similar, 2 different ways of doing the same thing, which is analyzing your notes. The second bullet point there, looking for themes and patterns. There's a really good way of finding patterns by categorizing everything that somebody said into either what they say, what they do, what they think, or what they feel. Like, you can go through an interview and take everything somebody said and put it into those 4 categories. If you do that, it's a way of forcing yourself to notice patterns that you may not have noticed otherwise. So I recommend trying to do that with your notes afterwards. And then, most important, at the end of all that processing of information, set action items. If you just process information and don't actually decide, like, okay, based on all this, we need to find a partner that can transport waste from point A to point B 3 times a week, and preferably somebody that can do it for less than $100 a trip. Like, once you've figured out exactly what needs to be done, like, make an action item. Go find company to drive truck with waste for less than $100 per trip, period. Like, put very specific action items for what to do next. Okay, I think we've got 2 more slides and we're done. So I've put here 6 different strategies. You know, we talked about cognitive behaviors at the beginning of the session to try and push yourself to be innovative. There's 6 different ways to really push yourself to identify ideas. So once you've done the observing, you've done the interviewing, there's 6 different ways to push yourself to generate ideas. So 1, analytical strategies. You can just look at a certain process or a certain substance, a certain like compound of some kind or another, and look at ways to improve it. And that can be like a like purposeful process. You can also use a search strategy, which is basically looking back at everything you learned over the course of your bio major, your biochem major, or your engineering major, looking back at all the stuff you learned, all the stuff you've noticed in your life in like volunteer activities or other internships or jobs you've had, and trying to put together the information from the past for something that might be a good idea in the future. The third is a habit breaking strategy, which is to purposefully push yourself outside your comfort zone. So, like, my comfort zone is my house. Like, you guys can see, I'm like, here's my sofa. Like, there's the living room, there's the foyer. Like, kitchen, foyer. I'm in the living room. So anyway, this is my comfort zone. If I wanted to force myself to find new ideas, I should go to campus, or I should go to a cafe with a bunch of strangers who are talking loud and are interrupting what I normally like to do and think, because that'll make me notice and think other things. If I'm listening to other people talk, if I'm in the middle of a cafe, like, I'm going to notice people's behaviors. I'm going to notice completely different things than I would at my house. In a more scientific, from a more scientific point of view, if you are a biochem person, which I believe a lot of you are, like, try and push yourself purposefully to think about things as a marketing person. Try and push yourself to think about things as a mechanical engineer rather than as a biochem person. Like, put on a different hat and force yourself to have that hat. It's going to help you come up with new ideas. On the other column here, imagination-based strategies. Suspend disbelief. It's super important to just let go of, oh God, that's not possible. Like, if people had, if people had gone with, oh, that's not possible, like we never would have gotten to the moon. We wouldn't have like satellites and rockets and a floating international space station. We wouldn't be talking about going to Mars, because originally there's no way in hell you can get a rocket off the ground. It's too heavy. But if you suspend disbelief and start just looking at, okay, A like leads to B, B leads to C, C leads to D. Ooh, wait, eventually at F, we're in orbit. So just suspend disbelief. Super important. These last two, I think, are the two most important and valuable idea generation methods. So one of them is a relationship seeking strategy. And I imagine a lot of you as kids probably at some point had an exercise where you're supposed to draw a line between like a thing in one column and a thing in another column, and put the things together that belong together, like the cow and the farm and the plane and the airport. And this is an adult version of that childhood learning strategy. So you basically make a big whiteboard or a big like dashboard on your computer screen, and you have 5 different areas. You have activities, environments, interactions. So that's like the normal like, let's see, activity environment, like driving cars usually happens in a city. That's an interaction between an activity and an environment. Object would be the car, like except for self-driving cars, which are now almost a mainstream reality. There's usually a person driving the car. So there you've got activity. Activity is driving, environment is the city, interaction is like the fact that the driving happens on certain roads within the city. The object is the car, the driver is the person. But like, what else could that person be doing besides driving a car? They could be eating ice cream. They could be sleeping. They could be like watching Parks and Rec. They could be doing anything. So force yourself to put things into those categories, and then force yourself to find connections between them that were not the obvious ones. And then finally, for deliberate questioning strategies, another really good way of generating new ideas is just force yourself to ask the questions: what is currently right now? What if, like, what would happen if we changed X, Y, or Z? What wows? So what is really exciting based on the things you might be able to change? And then finally, what works? Like, yeah, wow is great. Like, a Star Trek transporter would be awesome. But currently, we don't quite have the technology to make instant teleportation work. There's some promising developments, but if we tried right now to move me instantly from this sofa to my office on campus, it would not work. Maybe someday, but not today. So you also have to think about, as of today, what will work. And then finally, prototyping. So once you've done a bunch of observing and interviewing, and you've generated ideas, you need to apply those ideas in some kind of prototype. So, all of you STEM students are way more experienced than me in certain types of very specific technical prototypes, but I'm speaking here from a conceptual level at 5 basic types of prototypes, which are the next step to take when you're trying to bring ideas and turn them into a new product or service of some kind. So first one's a storyboard. Just get thoughts and ideas onto a screen, onto a whiteboard, have them out there as figures or drawings, and put the ideas and thoughts out there, and then start working with them. A wireframe, any of you, probably all of you in STEM fields know what that is, but certainly like software development people, a wireframe is something that's used in app development a lot, which is basically a drawing of exactly what all of the screens in the app would look like, etc. So more conceptually speaking, a wireframe is just a written mock-up of what the new product or new service or new process is going to look like. A rapid prototype is pretty much like the fastest, cheapest, easiest way to actually make something that looks like what you want in the end of the day. But it's made out of paper, it's made out of like cardboard. It's not actually the product, but it is a way of visualizing it at least. Next step after that is a mock-up, which is basically either 2D or 3D. And it looks like the finished product. It's not like a cheapo cardboard thing. It actually looks exactly like what you want it to be, but it doesn't actually have the functionality. It's like a car with no engine. But otherwise, this is where CAD design software and stuff comes in a lot of times, but you don't have to have a fancy CAD program to be able to draw a 2D or 3D model of what things are supposed to be. And then finally, high fidelity prototype is basically a model which actually has the functionality with it and allows users to be able to play with the product or the service or the solution. So that is basically the end of this presentation. Before I call it quits, I just want to loop back and kind of talk about where we started. So take initiative, think outside the box, solve problems, be relentlessly diligent, open-mindedly humble, transparently cooperative. And then we talked about roadblocks to entrepreneurial mindset. So fear, appetite for chaos, judging ideas too soon, being impatient, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, if you have trouble with taking initiative, then really the prototype is probably the biggest thing that's going to, the biggest thing that helps people that have a problem taking initiative is forcing yourself to do something. So prototypes a lot of times are the solution to not taking initiative. Also, if you have a problem thinking outside the box, if you have problems solving problems, really the other 5 are all addressed in one way or another by using the various idea generation strategies, the observation, the interviewing, the idea generation strategies that we talked about. The prototypes are really very much about taking initiative and also about solving problems, really about identifying problems so that you can solve them. Fear of the unknown. Honestly, the more that you practice the observation, interviewing, idea generation, the more you do those things, the more comfortable you're going to become with uncertain situations. The more you're going to recognize, oh, look, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. You don't have to be so afraid of failure. And I think judging ideas, incubation, lack of challenge to a certain extent, all 3 of those are really as well. You're going to get better at them as you practice the different observing, interviewing, and idea generation strategies we talked about. And then inability to distinguish reality from fantasy, that's where prototypes come in. So if I can loop back to the beginning, how to solve the weak areas that you have, that's how you apply what we talked about here to solve your innovation weaknesses. So that's it for this training. Depending on where you want to go for an internship, this may be enough. We may have several more trainings for you to do, and all of that will be explained as we go forward, depending on your indicated interests for what kind of internship you want to do. So that's it. I think all of you know how to contact me, but if you don't, I will just say 213-400-0829 is my cell number. You're always welcome to text me or call me. If it's 3 o'clock in the morning, I'll probably let you go to voicemail and I'll call you back, but you can reach out anytime. And then my email is jwoods7, JWOODS, and the number 7 at csub.edu. So between that and the sign up survey or questionnaire that you already filled out, you should be pretty clear on what's going on next. But if you have any more questions, just let me know. And that is the end of our presentation. Have a good rest of the day.